Thank you so much, Chris. And it's great to be here today on a cold winter's day to talk about NFTs. So before we start, I'm going to try and see if I can see everyone. It would be really helpful to get a bit of an idea of where everyone's at with the whole NFT concept. So could you raise your hand if you own an NFT? Raise your hand in the Zoom so I can get kind of an idea. Anyone raising their hand? All right, we've got a few. Brilliant. We've got another one raising hand physically in the space. Okay, perfect. Brilliant. And okay, my next question I actually have a slide for. So how many of you, the first time you heard about an NFT was that famous Beeple sale at Christie's in March? Yeah, no shame in it. You can just let us know. That's very helpful. Really good. So given the introduction from John, I now have a bit of context about this group and how much you know about distributed ledger technology. But of course, all of us who have been in the DLT space for a while were probably a bit surprised about the growth of this term non-fungible token and how much it's really latched on with people and gotten a lot of momentum. And what I'm hoping to do with this talk is to provide a bit of context about this whole phenomenon. As Chris mentioned, I work in the art sector, specifically with museums and exhibitions. And when I heard about distributed ledger technology back in 2015, I already thought this is an amazing tool for an industry where Christie's and Sotheby's don't even share data with each other. And then when it started growing, I've gotten more and more interested, and now because of the huge growth of NFTs, a lot of the cultural institutions we speak to are talking to us to try and understand what this means for them and how they handle a lot of those issues that John was mentioning about fingerprinting their content, making sure that they understand the legal rights of this, etc. But this talk is a bit of context. So firstly, about the Beeple work that was sold. A lot of people don't know, and it's quite surprising that it was sold at Christie's. Beeple is an outsider artist who did a lot of things that were a little bit controversial. But what he sold within that work that sold in March is that it's a drawing he did every single day for 13 years. He posted it for free on a blog, and people subscribed to it and looked at it. When he first started, I have a bit of a closer view here on this slide. When he first started, it was using kind of Microsoft Paint, the digital graphics of back 13 years ago, where it was on a white background, a bit of a squiggle and everything. And as the years progressed, his technique got better. And a lot of the images from this collage that were published were actually from more recent times, when he's even got the 3D graphics going on. So he's got memes of Donald Trump or Putin or whatever it might be in 3D, almost like a gaming rendering thing. And Medakovan, who bought this work, said that the reason it's so interesting for him is because of the fact that no one could hack this work in retrospect, because no one can hack time. And it's 13 years worth of drawings. And in his opinion, it is worth 1 billion. So that goes into that idea about value and what is value. The other interesting fact about this is that Medakovan and Troubadour, the partners who bought this NFT at Christie's, there were at least 2 people who wanted it, but the ones who actually won are planning to open a museum called B20, where you can use tokens to access these drawings. So it's quite an interesting thing that you've taken 13 years of history and you want to put them into a virtual environment where people can come visit it. Now, on the other side, you've got a whole other value proposition that has been growing over the past few years, namely since the 60s, which is that of generative art and using a cryptography within arts practice. If you're interested in that, it's quite interesting to look at, for example, Vera Molnar, who is an artist who was even creating generative art before computers had screens. So there are all these different types of things going on in this space. And what I'm going to do is kind of look at why this happened. So this is a chart of the NFT sales from 2020 to 2021, thanks to Art Tactic. And if you see, there suddenly was this huge growth in 2021. But it's not just fine art NFT sales. You have sales that are happening at auction houses. You have generative art projects. So that tends to be art created with AI. And then you have crypto collectible projects. So we'll go a little bit into what the differences are, etc. But just recapping a little bit what an NFT is. I'm sure most people know this already, but it's a reference. It's an encrypted reference to a digital asset that can be owned within a crypto wallet. And then with that asset, you can use it in virtual environments, what some people call the metaverse, to make yourself unique and to connect with others who have similar interests. So I like to use this diagram to kind of explain what the background is of it. What is interesting about this is that you can take a file that is stored on the permaweb within distributed systems like Arweave or IPFS, which a lot of these actually came about to combat fake news, as was mentioned earlier. So you store the file on the permaweb across distributed P2P servers, and then the token that you own is actually just a reference to that URL. So it's a reference with some metadata saying this piece is this, and it's linking to the piece, and then it says who was the wallet that created it, and who is the wallet that currently owns it. And so what's interesting there is that you can have metadata, you can create rules in the smart contracts of transfer of ownership about royalties, and make sure that different people get get their share of future sales. So what's interesting is distributed ledger technology was all about timestamping, about making sure that something happened at a specific point in time and that these entities entered this information inside of a database at this time. You then use encryption to make that extremely secure. You save it over decentralized servers. You get this disintermediation of the market because, as we've seen with artists, but across the board, you don't need the middlemen to interact between parties. But the unexpected effect of this is community. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about in this talk. So let's look at the 13 years of how these NFTs have come about. Interestingly, overlaps with the 13 years of Beeple. About 13 years ago, the Bitcoin white paper was published. Halloween of 2013. 2008. And what's interesting about it, which I mentioned frequently, one of the main things that's in the first page is about the hash-based proof of work, where the longest chain and the largest pool of CPU power is the one that can save the next node, right? That's something that's now become such a problem, this proof of work blockchain's infrastructure, but it traces its way all the way back to Satoshi. But while that was a technical paper trying to combat some of the distrust that has built up against the financial systems that disappointed many people in that time period around 2008, it's also created a sort of dogmatic approach where people believe in this almost like you believed in the Bible, where we need to, it's like a religious zealotry of like, we need to change the way our systems work, and there is better, and we believe in it, and we're trying to achieve it. So trying to save digital art on the blockchain already started happening with the Bitcoin protocol in 2013 to 2015 with a company called Ascribe. They tried their best. They thought it was a really interesting way to have digital ownership passed between people. But by 2015, it was clear, as they said, that it was very difficult in terms of scaling, user experience, interoperability, and security. So they still believe that the concept made sense, but it was just not mature enough for it to evolve. They've actually gone on to build Ocean protocol, which is quite a popular data protocol. Fantastic. So yeah, what people keep thinking about having creative content on blockchains. And in 2015, Spells of Genesis came about, and it was a mobile game where you could trade cards. They still exist today. You can find them on OpenSea. This is a screenshot of them from OpenSea. So people could start playing with each other with assets on the blockchain. Bear in mind, this is not yet, we do not yet have the definition of NFTs at this point. It's just art or creative assets on the blockchain. Then we get to 2016 and something changes. So in 2016, you start having the Rare Pepe wallets. And Rare Pepe, what was different from Rare Pepe and Spells of Genesis was that the users could create their own cards. So instead of using the Spells of Genesis cards that were created by the game, you created your own cards. So this is a Pepe Basquiat. There are a lot of different Pepes out there, but users started enjoying thinking of their Pepe. And Pepe, I don't know if anyone's watched the BBC documentary that's on right now. It's really great about the illustrator who created this. It's been appropriated as a symbol of the alt-right. It's been on Reddit and 4chan and all kinds of things, but really it's just a meme that's easy to redraw. So that's why people were doing so much with Rare Pepes, because Pepe could symbolize so much. And this is actually the original, and it said, "Feels good, man," kind of going back to that community feeling. But there were other interesting things happening with art and blockchain at the time as well. So Dada.art is actually taking a version of that exquisite corpse game where you fold a piece of paper and someone continues your drawing, but did it online. You had to do your drawing in one sitting. So if you can imagine, these artists from around the world worked together with Microsoft Paint style tools to create drawings together. It's really extraordinary. And they use the blockchain to attribute which artist created each piece. And they always thought that if those pieces ever sold, that the royalties would be shared within all of the artists. And they have thought of really interesting ways now to show these really long drawings that were continued by a lot of artists. And they've gone on to write amazing things about the invisible economy and how decentralization can facilitate creative processes. So definitely worth looking at. But something changed in January 2018 when at the Rare Art Festival in New York City, Homer Pepe sold for $38,500. That was when everyone thought, hold on a second, what's going on here? Because up to this point, people had been trading Rare Pepes. It was kind of interesting. And then it was like, why, how can someone put what many would think of as a year's salary in one digital asset? That's extraordinary. And it was, at the end of the day, a good investment for this guy, because he did sell it this year for £320,000. So yeah, good return on investment. But at the time, I still remember thinking, most people thought, what is this? How could you be spending this much on a digital asset on the blockchain? A few months later, you had a Cryptokitty that sold for $140,000 at the Ethereal Summit, facilitated by Consensus. Interestingly, Consensus's wallet, MetaMask, wasn't advanced enough at the time. So when they bought the Cryptokitty, they actually bought it on a physical wallet rather than within a digital wallet, because the technology and the infrastructure, that scalability and user experience that Ascribe mentioned, wasn't advanced enough yet. Sorry, I went backwards. Around this time as well, these guys have now become so famous, the Cryptopunks. But at the time, it was just two guys, two artists, were playing around with generative art and decided to create a series of 10,000 punks inspired by the London punk scene of the 70s, 60s and 70s. So the algorithm would randomly attribute these punks with different features. Some of the features were more rare and some of them were less rare. So for example, there are men, women, apes, aliens, and there are only 9 aliens within the 10,000. So it's very rare to have an alien, which is one of these turquoise figures. When they first issued them, they couldn't even give them away. Only 1,000 of them sold and 9,000 of them were given away to people. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? But what really is quite interesting at this time is that the Cryptokitty standard was created, the ERC 721, which is the standard for saving the metadata with the link to the original asset and defining that unique asset on the blockchain that actually is the same standard that was used by people at Christie's, if you want to trace it all the way back. So this standard is what really facilitated that sudden boom. So from 2018, you start getting everyone using ERC 721 as the standard for NFTs. In July 2018, that's me on stage at Christie's. We helped organize an event at Christie's in London, exploring blockchain. Again, this is pre-NFTs. And there are one of the founders from Art, one of the founders of Cryptopunks, one of the founders of Rare Art Labs, and Masha from Ascribe, all on a panel discussing digital art on the blockchain. And at that time, they even said on stage, we think this is the most likely way for art to work. For digital art to live on the blockchain and be traded on the blockchain is the most promising of all of the applications of art and blockchain. That's what they said at the time. Interestingly, we gave away 300 NFTs at that event. They were the first NFTs to be, some of the first NFTs to be minted on Super Rare. And some of those NFTs that were given away are now selling for up to $1 million. So it's pretty extraordinary. The gift bag from that event has turned into an amazing result for a lot of people. And those NFTs were actually from an artist called Robbie Barrett. And I like to take a moment to talk about his practice because it explains a little bit about this phenomenon of artists using technology and finding it interesting to place things on the blockchain to capture a moment in time. So Robbie teaches algorithms to paint. He might teach them to paint skulls, to paint landscapes, to paint portraits. And then he has all of that code in open source. Anyone can use it. But he then corrupts those algorithms and he calls that his practice, his artistic practice. The way that the algorithms get corrupted through the wrong training data he provides them is how he creates images that he considers his art. And so, for example, the works that were given away at Christie's were nude portraits, an algorithm trained on nudes, but the computer could never understand flesh properly. So it starts getting corrupted, but unlike a painter who's trying to paint flesh and gets kind of creative in how to think about flesh, but still really understands what flesh is, this is a computer rethinking what flesh is, and it's pixels and it's ethereal. It's not, it has no blood, no substance. So it's quite interesting as a comment on our relationships between art and technology. Anyway, going back to the timeline of NFTs, the moment that we at Vastari kind of, our ears were like, okay, something is up here, was in December 2020, when the sales of NFTs jumped from 2.6 million in November to 8.2 million in December. That's when we kind of thought, hold on a second, we have to organize a talk to figure out what's going on here. This is a little bit too much, etc. It's also around the time that Kenny Schachter, who's a art world veteran, started minting things on OpenSea. I tokenized my grandma Blanche. Yeah, he was creating funny things on OpenSea. He's now gone on to do quite a lot. Then in February 2021, the amount, by the second month of 2021, the amount sold was almost the same amount as what was sold in all of 2020. And that then was like, gosh, this is really getting somewhere. Then, of course, you had that famous Beeple sale, but the extraordinary thing didn't happen at the Beeple sale. It was that it continued afterwards. It wasn't just one big spotlight auction. The sales kept happening and still keep happening. So $2.5 billion spent on NFTs in the first half of 2021. What I like to conclude with here is a little bit about what this technology has facilitated in terms of creation. You've got many different approaches from artists about how they can use this technology to enable their practice. The guy in the middle is called Kevin Abosch. He actually tokenized himself. He's taken his blood, his DNA, his self-portraits, his crypto wallet, everything, and tokenized it and sold it. So he thinks of it as an artist, he's commenting on the fact that you're kind of selling yourself. And that's what his practice is completely about. This is him taking blood to then create an artwork. On the left, you have Murat Pak, as he's more commonly known, he or she, or they. We don't know, they're still anonymous. So anonymity is one of the interesting things that happen with artists here. You can just be a pseudonym. But what Pak does is create puzzles that collectors need to respond to in order to win the next token. So for example, there was one edition that you could buy and then you had to burn it, which basically means you send the NFT to a wallet where it will never be able to be sold. And then once it's burned, you received a new token called Ash. And so you got ashes from the artist, and those ashes could then be used to buy his next piece. So kind of creating this concept of, if you believe in me enough, you'll even destroy the work, the value that you have with me, this work, you're going to send it somewhere where you'll never be able to sell it. And then I'll reward you with my next work. And because it's on the blockchain, you can airdrop works to your collectors. It's public to know who has collected your works and what it is. So all of these artists actually have airdropped works to their collectors before in the past. And then on the right, I think this video, I thought I didn't have videos, but this does work much better if I show the video. This is an artist who creates with virtual reality. So her artworks are things you can step into and actually look around in 360 degrees. This is something that would never have been able to be owned by a collector before, because they are digital works, might have been able to consider publishing them as an experience on an app store or a game store for virtual reality. But this is now providing a way for her, Anna Dreambrush, to sell her works to collectors who would like to own them. So the blockchain has really enabled some artistic concepts that would never have been possible before NFTs existed. And it's created a direct link with artists that never happened before. And it's now growing beyond art. So if you look at the largest platforms, many of them have links to gaming, links to collectibles, links to digital real estate. And you have all of these different types of NFTs starting to develop, and it's going beyond just the fine art that we started with. And even with the fine art, one of the platforms that has the most users actually is mostly for not unique one-of-one NFTs, but actually inspired by the ERC 1155, kind of having a lot of tokens linking to the same asset. So I guess you could think of it as limited editions, or you could think of it as shares. We haven't really thought about what it means. People just buy them and want to own one of the ones that links to that original artwork. So I think most of the collectors think of them as limited editions. But if you look at the structure, you could consider them a share of the work of art. And then lastly, of course, as I mentioned earlier about proof of work versus proof of stake, most of the platforms that grew in the time period from 2016 till 2019 were built on proof of work blockchains like Ethereum. Ethereum was very much ahead because of the wallet they developed. MetaMask really helps people be able to own these things and interact with a lot of different platforms on the web. But it is proof of work, which has huge criticisms because of its environmental impact. So what we've seen more recently is the development of public ledger technology that is less carbon heavy, such as Flow, Polygon, Tezos. These are all proof of stake blockchains that are developing to kind of solve these problems. Well, Polygon is a layer to Ethereum, so it's still part of the Ethereum ecosystem. But it looks as though the future is multi-chain, and it's going to be a really interesting next few years. Just a little quick one. I helped an NFT project on Tezos for the Whitworth in Manchester. So if you have a moment to take a look, it's called the Ancient of Days NFT, and the Whitworth minted a multispectral image of one of their most important or famous works in their collection. And all the proceeds from this sale are going to be given to a community fund for people in Moss Side in Manchester. So the concept is that one of that value chain is rethought of the value from the big museum collection, creating capital for the community. And furthermore, it's going to be included in an exhibition about economics and art in 2023. So that'll be quite interesting. They're going to track what happens over the next 2 years and exhibit it within that show. This is the tracker that is not for sale. It's just an NFT showing the sales that happened. But yeah, backtracking a little bit, this was all about time stamping. It was all about knowing who put what into a database at what time, and using encryption to facilitate that kind of anonymity and the trust. Using decentralized servers so that it wouldn't be just one organization managing this information. That then resulted in disintermediation because of the fact that you can have direct contact in transactions. You don't need a bank to settle it. You don't need an auction house to settle it, even though auction houses have been doing that. And the unexpected result, which I think everyone loves about this space, those who do love it, is the community it built, because that disintermediation somehow created direct links for people around things that they loved. And yeah, that feels good. So that's my brief introduction to NFTs and the decentralized economy.
Super, thank you so much. I mean, in art history, we need art history lessons, and that's the type of art history we need to start developing. Actually, I work in the Edinburgh College of Art. I have a very groovy institute called Design Informatics, which makes it sound quite geeky. But nevertheless, I work with art scholars and art historians and art students, and it's been really interesting. We have a 22-year-old fine art student who's in his final year, and he's helping us work through the values that you highlight, as well as the technology, Bernadine. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is that last point around community. It's doing something different. So Ross is finding himself, because he was an early investor creator. He's now in groups of 200, 250 art students buying and selling things at Sotheby's and Christie's, which, I mean, he's not graduated. So his art tutors, who of course are relatively failed artists, that's why they're teaching, are just astonished that this group, this tribe, as you say, this community, are now opening up, cutting, and they're traveling, they're traversing the economic space of the art market right to the top. And I think there's something in that spirit, that esprit de corps.
I read something really interesting. I think it was earlier today, even about that someone was saying that the art world is up in arms about the way that this has kind of traversed into their most sacred space of the auction house, but that they have for years been valuing art based on auction results in the press and in their own circles, that they've created that as the epitome of what is good art. Yeah. So if that is what has started being the thing that's being used, then it's easy to hack. And once it's hacked, you realize that it was never really about that anyway. So it kind of is a really interesting point. I think the community element of it is, I once did spoke with someone who worked at Facebook and said their slogan was global community, and that it was always very difficult for her as an employee there to think of that slogan, because global means everyone and community actually means exclusion. It means you're in a group of people that you connect with. And I do think that there's something of that happening here in the NFT space. It's so transparent that everyone can see what's going on, but not all of it is the same. There is a huge difference, a plethora of different types of communities in this space. Some of them are louder, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club owners, and some of them are quieter and more global, like the Hiket Nung community that I pointed out on Tezos. They're just very different communities, but that has been possible thanks to the public ledger technology.
Great stuff. So I've got still a few more questions, but I do want to make sure that this is participatory. So people who posted things into the chat: Chris Carr, Leonard, and let me have a scroll down here and see who else we've got here. Glenn, I will bring you in if you don't mind. So I'm going to ask one more, then see if Chris wants to come on. Having said the community, the involvement, when I talk to Ross, ultimately he is making money. And I was quite surprised by that. There was a moment when I thought, wow, you've managed to break through the control of the art market that in which the economic value is managing the creation and production of cultural value. And that they were intimately tied, that the Anthony DeFays of this world held a particular position of power. And you've broken it, Ross. But no, actually, he's in it for some of the money too. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they've been appropriated. That's what's really interesting, right? Because it was all about disintermediation, but now you have these middlemen that have developed. People are trying their best to get into Christie's to sell their NFT, and also on curated marketplaces like Super Rare, Known Origin, Foundation, where artists need to apply to be allowed to sell on those platforms. And that is because also another element of this system is there's no such thing as utopia. You still need someone to help market your things. Yes, anyone can buy your work, but that means anyone can buy anyone's work. And so it's very difficult to have that discoverability. So what these new middlemen have done is kind of facilitate that discoverability. And it's really interesting that for Christie's and Sotheby's, actually, these sales have become the thing that have made up for a lot of their lost revenue during the pandemic, and they're delighted to have crypto collectors on their books now.
Interesting, very interesting. So let me turn to the community here. Chris Carr, are you there? Are you still?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to ask a little bit of a technical question. So, I work at the University of Exeter, and I come from the cryptography community, and so it was actually very interesting when you talk about this from I don't really have much of a perspective from the art side, so actually that was very interesting. But when you mentioned encryption earlier, I immediately thought, that isn't how we share tokens, right? And I don't know that much about NFTs because, I tend to think, okay, this is digital art, and effectively, how do I really stop the double spend problem? So I stop the double spend problem because it's no good me having loads of Ethereum if I don't own the digital signature to it. But if I can just look up anybody's reference to some art, I can go, I can have that on my wall. I can print it out from my printer, and I can have the same. So where's the value there? And also, so genuinely, that's another question, but you can ignore that one for now. I'm just interested about this encryption aspect. Is that how it works, or are we just using digital signatures?
So in terms of the double, so there are a few different things. The asset itself, as I mentioned, isn't actually in the NFT. It's encrypted through a service like IPFS, which returns a hash that is then stored in the NFT. So that's the encryption there. You actually encrypt the asset on the permaweb with a unique reference. And what I know is through the use of it, right? So I know that if you upload the exact same asset with the same name and the same metadata, the same hash comes back. So you cannot mint the same asset twice, because the computer uses the same encryption metrics and will return that already exists. So there's a bit of a kind of, I mean, you can then shrink down the image or rename it or whatever and still save the same image, but there is a certain level of care there. And then the other element is that it's not just one aspect that's encrypted, all of the different areas of it, from the timestamp to the creator to everything is encrypted into that block that's saved on the public ledger. So that is what creates the security of it. That's as far as I can go on the encryption front. I don't know if it's using Rand's book of infinite digits or whatever, of random digits. It's more that I understand how it's being used in practice so far.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I was going to say, from what you're describing, it sounds to me not like encryption, but more like just hash function, just a use of hash functions, in which you'd call a message digest. But I might just be, I might actually not know. That it might be wrong.
I might
also
sounds
like it sounds like it might not be encryption. Things are done, but it doesn't matter too much, I suppose.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, okay.
I might need to edit my talk if hashes are not encryption.
Yes.
In my mind, it's related to each other, but maybe I need to take one of your courses. Yeah. So yeah.
No, thanks. Well, thank you, Chris. It's a good one. This is, again, I must admit, someone said to me that getting your head around blockchain, Chris, is going to be like trying to hold 7 grapefruits. And truth is, Chris, you can only hold 4 at a time. You're always going to be dropping the concept of one other grapefruit. I wonder if Leonard is there to bring him in. Leonard, are you there?
Yes, I've just put myself on.
Great, nice to see you. You're through to our speaker, Bernadine.
Oh dear, oh dear. Yeah, you shouldn't put old men on doing this sort of stuff, but never mind. I'm Dr. Leonard Anderson, originally a research chemist, in fact, but I represent the Convex Foundation, which is a not-for-profit open source network. It's level 1 proof of stake, digital ledger technology. For artists and the like, it's almost 0 cost per transaction because of the stake method, and you get millisecond response times to confirm the block. Because it's level 1, you don't need anything like Ethereum for backing it, which often there's layer 2 rollups are necessary, and we've demonstrated 100,000 transactions per second. And we can do gaming of blocks, Minecraft type games in real time. So it's actually updating Minecraft blocks in real time. We're currently in alpha, building the beta. We've got the demos there. We've got a wallet, got sandbox. It's full stack development. And I'm here because I said, look, there's an asset here that developers and people like Bernadine can have a look at. You can try it out. It's all for free, and I'm sure you'll find bugs in it. But all I'm trying to do here is, initially, is because I've got friends in Guildford who run the Guildford Art Society. And I thought, actually, you go to an art exhibition, and you like lots of stuff. Oh, I'd like that. But actually, I've got nowhere to put it. Right? I like looking at art and studying it, and I thought, well, perhaps something like, the Watts Gallery, if you know that one, you could actually get really good NFTs of some of the work they've got, and I can put it on a big screen and look at it, or something like that. So I think there's a massive opportunity. And the other thing, which is the source of my question, right? Do you think there's an opportunity for micropayments, right? Because if somebody views something, give the artist a penny or a pound, whatever it is, for somebody who looks at it. And because we've got such a high speed transaction engine, we can easily manage publications, artworks. The transaction costs are actually very low, but if you have an art gallery and say, you want to pay £5 to go in, you can distribute the £5 over the 10 artists or whatever it is, and we can manage micropayments at global scale.
Yeah, I think your question a lot is about these new business models that really are unlocked through the technology that's being developed. And on the attention token side, there is a really interesting protocol called Coin Network that is using the Arweave protocol and is looking at doing that you earn attention tokens for views and that type of thing if you use that asset. I think that's definitely something that is interesting. One of the things that's avoiding, your example, the Watts Gallery or any cultural institution, why they are kind of hesitant is the legal side of this in terms of there are so many questions actually when it comes to intellectual property.
Fiat currency, if you get to fiat currency, there are problems immediately. But
absolutely.
But if you have a wallet, right, with, I'll call them low-cost tokens, right, because our model is not for investors, speculators interested in the value of the tokens, right? Because the tokenomics are very simple, right? You can predict what the cost is going to be. So it's not about making money on tokens, Ethereum or Bitcoin. It's about reducing financial friction and extending, right, safe transactions and payments for domestic retail consumer level, right? So it's high speed, low cost transactions, and where the cost of a transaction in Ethereum might be several dollars and might take several days to, it's
sustainability issues. And I think you're right, the speculation in the market is also a huge problem in the space, because these tokens have become things that investors invest in that are not actually using the tokens, and they affect the volatility of the assets that are being used to save transactions. So it's really frustrating that there are so many speculators in the space, and the future is doing things at a lower cost and unlocking distributed ledger technology that is cheaper. It's just about the sustainability of the infrastructure if people aren't earning all that money from saving each transaction, right? That's a bit of the tokenomic question, maybe.
What we're I'm gonna stop you and let Glenn in, because in some way it segues to your question, Glenn. Thank you, Marit. Leonard, Glenn, you're around value, and you're particularly interested in, again, this questions of rewards.
Yeah, to be honest, a question for Bernadine. I've been following her on the story for quite some time, and I love the talks they do. So I'll plug you there shamelessly, because I think what you do is brilliant. I particularly like the Molinar's talk on her art.
Oh my gosh, that was brilliant, wasn't it?
That was superb, really good. But yeah, I actually co-authored the early paper that explained the work that Masha and Trent did on blockchain, provenance, and digital art. Their work was quite brilliant. I met them in Digital Catapult, who are all here, at one of their events really early on. It was brilliant, and it was too soon. They're such visionaries, they were ahead of the game, which unfortunately meant they probably didn't cash in on what they could have done. But obviously now we're with NFTs, and I love what you've done here. But do you think NFTs solve the problems for artists to be rewarded? Do we have further to go? And what do you see are the core weaknesses in NFTs?
Well, definitely it is solving some problems, because we've seen artists that never were able to earn from their art unless they did commissions. So these are artists who did the music videos for certain musicians or created the art for certain posters. They never were able to create art just for art's sake. And that has really unlocked quite a lot of potential. I think the majority of artists haven't quit their day job. They do this on the side, and they earn it as a side hustle, because it's so difficult to foresee if it is sustainable yet. I mean, it's been quite some time now, but will people continue to buy the tokens and support artists? Will their attention suddenly go to a different place where they can put their cryptocurrency, and that kind of goes away? So I think people are realistic about that, but it has definitely unlocked some amazing things happening. The artwork that's behind me right now, actually, it's a token that was, well, it's a generative artwork that was created by an artist on a website called FX Hash, where the artist created the variables and every person could go and mint their own version. There's another one on Ethereum called Art Blocks, but basically that you can mint your own version of the artwork. So some of them are pink, some of them are turquoise, some of them are white, whatever it might be. And you get your own unique souvenir of the artist's thinking, if that makes sense. And some of them become valuable. Some of them are just a memento for people that kind of remind them of something. But because you do them in an edition, so say, for example, you do an edition of 300 and people have to pay $3 each to get their, or the equivalent of $3 in Tezos to get their own version, you suddenly get $900, and that's a really amazing way to unlock. That's not even counting in the fact that in the future, if these tokens are sold, as long as the marketplaces continue to honor the smart contracts of the tokens, you get the royalties. So there is a lot of potential. Yeah, on the weakness side, that royalty, that honoring of the royalties is something that has been an issue. So when a lot of the Ethereum-based marketplaces started, for example, OpenSea, they tried to completely ignore the royalty contracts that were within the NFTs and create their own and say, you'll only get X% as an artist, and also within different blockchains, the contracts can't necessarily read each other, so you'll have to create these kind of connections to be able to read each other. But Rarible has just announced that they are building a lot of that infrastructure to be able to read contracts cross-chain. So that innovation is coming about.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really interesting. Yeah, lots of issues. Nathan, I'm just going down the list now, folks, if you've figured that out. Nathan, are you there?
Yes, and thanks, Bernadine, for a really great talk. I guess my question was around, it's probably the classic question of, what does it mean to own an NFT? Because you mentioned that it's a reference to a file that is on a distributed database, and I guess the value there, and it's about, I guess, the double spend problem is essentially the collective belief that file and that system is more valuable than an identical file on the normal web or on someone's hard drive. And that then, I guess, implies a belief in, I guess, this could be connected to the metaverse concept, that file will be privileged, or that file system will be privileged over other conventional file systems. Or is that wrong?
I think that's where the file is not the thing. So the file, so if you were to create an NFT, and this happened actually, there was an organization from Singapore called Global Art Museum that minted NFTs of a lot of works that are in the public domain, from the Art Institute of Chicago, from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, from the Birmingham Museums here in the UK, and they just minted them and tried to sell them. And they didn't sell, even though the images are strong, because they didn't have the approval of the owner or the artist behind that work. So the real magic and the reason people want it is because they can prove that they were there and able to buy that work from that artist, and they're a supporter of that. And your wallet almost becomes like, I like to think of it this way. People post things on Instagram to kind of define themselves, right? They post it on, and they have all these images that kind of say, this is me. And when you do that, technically, Facebook owns that image and licenses it back to you, because otherwise there would be lots of copyright issues and blah, 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 blah. But what this is doing is saying, sure, you can do that, but this is my image. So your wallet is kind of a collection of things that you can define yourself by. And then, so many tokens only have value for that first purchase because it means something to you and it's unlikely that someone else will want it. But then once it starts being a coveted item, then people start buying it. I guess it's the same with any asset, right? So clothes, if you buy them for yourself, they're nice, but then some clothes become fashion, haute couture, that people will even buy them secondhand at a premium. So it's kind of about that that cachet around the thing. And then you want to have the one that, if you're buying it for the cachet, you want to have the one that is authentic, that is really from the source wallet that you wanted it from, not from anywhere else.
Great, that's a really great brief, because I think, like, as I'm an outsider from the space,
describing it,
so
but yeah.
My follow-up question is that something that you think is an accepted understanding in those communities, or do people sometimes get confused even within the community about what they own?
Definitely. I think that there has been confusion. I think that a lot of kids have learned a lot about copyright very quickly and they did not realize. I think there will be changes to the law, I suspect, based on what's happening here. But that hasn't happened yet. So technically, when you buy an NFT, the default is that you do not own the copyright. You own the copyright for private use, and that just like if you bought a painting. So you can have it in your personal wallet, but you can't go and print it on t-shirts and sell it. But there are ambiguous places. For example, I'm exhibiting an artwork by an artist that I own the NFT of in a public setting. What are the rules there? And those have not been defined. And so far, artists are very happy for me to use their images in public locations to showcase their ability. But that is going to change. And as our hybrid experiences change and our use of these digital goods change, those rules are going to have to change, because, I mean, keeping track of every time I'm on Zoom and using this background and how many people view it and all that copyright issue is quite complicated. However, maybe systems will develop, like the attention tokens described, etc., that will help facilitate that somehow.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, terrific, great. It keeps down this rabbit hole, right? So it keeps giving. Hannah, are you there?
I am. Thanks,
Hello.
Chris.
Hi.
Bernadine, thanks. I'm a board trustee of a national gallery, and we interact with the art market on behalf of the general public and the nation. But of course, what I'm worried about is, given the demographic of cryptocurrency owners and those actually capable of navigating the tech, aren't we simply focusing the new digital art market into the hands of a new, techno elite? And then, of course, that comment that you made about Christie's and Sotheby's regaining all of their profits back as well. That's the old elite now investing. So what do we do about that disparity?
Have more of the people that understand the ethics and values understand this technology too, because it's being written still. So the reason that it's benefiting the techno elite is because they wrote it. So they're going to write the rules in a way, i.e. earning mining fees, having certain benefits that benefit them. But then if you have others getting involved, you can help build it in a different way. Also, there are more accessible blockchains, I guess you could say. So I mentioned Tezos because they have so many users, because it's easy to onboard. You can start with just £5 if you want to, and collect artists' work for 30 cents. And for some artists in Indonesia, it has helped them quit their jobs and do that kind of thing. So I think that I'm in touch all the time with cultural institutions, wondering if this is interesting. And I'm a big believer in the power of bridging over cultural divides. And I think that there can be really interesting bridges built here. But we need kind of equal playing field in terms of knowledge and expertise to really make that happen.
Excellent. I'll be in touch about an education department project then.
Brilliant. I do hope that it starts being that people collect NFTs as a memory of going to a digital, like a gallery, and that they can then show off to their friends that they know who Rembrandt is. I mean, that is the future, right? But yeah, it's going to take some time.
Super. Thanks, Hannah. Evan, a colleague of mine at Edinburgh. How are you doing?
Oh, yeah, thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. So yeah, I'm working on the Decade project, but I guess I've been on a bit of a personal journey with NFTs over the course of the year, kind of starting off in January, buying a $1 pack NFT on Nifty Gateway, through to now kind of having fun, enjoying the artwork on FX Hash. And I suppose over the course of that, it's kind of veered into like close to gambling, and then like now I think in a space where I'm actually like purchasing digital art that I really enjoy, and so I've seen a lot of different kind of communities and values, and in terms of like the technology behind NFTs as well, also seeing different ways that they can work. I know Pac did a thing the other week where he gifted NFTs to people that had kind of criticized him on Twitter, and then he took them away from them. He kind of burnt them. I think people had kind of assumptions around NFTs being things that they owned and that they could keep themselves, but he kind of broke down those assumptions. And so my question was really kind of around terminology, because I think you've got this term NFT that kind of carries a lot of occasionally kind of negative connotations, but also assumptions around values and communities. And I'm wondering whether it's time maybe for us to drop the NFT term and think about more specific terms that represent these different communities and genres and values. You know, I guess a comparison would be, you know, talking about buying a CD. You know, when we used to buy music and albums, you just say, I'm buying an album. Like, you don't need to specify the format that is coming out. I wonder whether, and if so, have you kind of heard, have you seen any of that starting to begin in terms of terminology?
I haven't seen it start to begin. I think humans have a very, they latch on to things. So I think we globally have latched onto this acronym for some reason, and it now holds so much weight. And I don't think, therefore, that it can disappear so quickly. However, I do think the future is that is not a term, that you just buy a digital good and you own it in your wallet. And you don't need to know that if it should be called an NFT or if it should be called something else. It's just that you trust that you really own it in your wallet, and that you can sell it one day if you wanted to, and that you can use it in online spaces. And that's where I hope we go. And I still think there's quite a lot to be done in terms of, I keep going back to the wallets, because that is really the key here. The crypto wallets that have been developed are all from the cryptocurrency side and different types of interest. But you now see Facebook developing a wallet, governments developing like digital wallets and digital currencies. So the way that our digital goods are incorporated into that is going to be really interesting to watch. And I definitely think that the terminologies will evolve as that evolves. But the concept really is that you can navigate the web with your things in your pocket, and then decide to show people or use them when you see fit. Yeah, and once we can say that our digital things are equal or just as valuable as our physical ones, then we get there. But I think for young people, that is obvious. To many older people, that's not obvious. Yeah, that's what I've found, at least.
Great, cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Nick at the BBC, fascinating question for yourself, to the extent it might even transform government. Well, the BBC, over to you.
Hi, Bernadine. I think my questions are really around business models. So taking on board with the discussion that you've just had about talking about NFTs specifically, are you aware of Stoner Cats? Yeah, okay. So, you know, that business model, or that way of funding creativity in terms of using a technology to raise funds for a program, and the ownership of that IP staying with the content owners. Do you see, I mean, that's what you've been talking about in the art world, but do you see that model not being as much as an experiment? I think Vitalik Buterin called Stoner Cats an experiment just to show what you could do with NFTs. Do you actually see those models actually becoming real? Is the question.
Yes, and it still needs some work. So a lot of this collective ownership piece is what John mentioned earlier about distributed autonomous organizations, or DAOs. I hope I got the right word with an A. I think it is autonomous. But basically the concept, currently that concept is being used a lot as almost like a shared wallet. So there was a shared wallet that tried to buy the Constitution at Sotheby's the other day, where they called it the Constitution DAO, but there wasn't any governance model for that shared wallet. It was just a lot of people putting money in, and kind of was like a crowdfunding campaign, and then you could use it. But where it gets more sophisticated and more interesting is where you do have those governance systems in place, that if you do contribute to that shared wallet, that you then own a token of some sort that demonstrates your contribution, and then gives you some kind of a voting right in the direction of that shared wallet going forward. And I think that is where things are kind of interesting, and some interesting developments are coming about there, but those experiments are happening in real time right now. There's even an NFT marketplace that's trying to distribute its governance completely, so that it can just be run by the artists themselves rather than by an investor or anything like that. And I think it's utopian, but I think a lot of the concepts within it could potentially evolve. And specifically for me, as a person who's been on the VC route and kind of fundraising route with technology, I think it's really exciting to think, going back to the concept of who is the elite and who has the power and who has the thing, that you can leverage the power of community to have new ownership models that might disrupt the power that, these basically oligarchs currently have around the world. So I do think that there is something interesting there. I don't know enough about the technology, but I know that there is a risk on all of the distributed systems that are using proof of stake, that if you have a lot of money, you could potentially take over the blockchain decision-making process. And so I think there is something also, again, in regulation or government involvement to protect people from those types of bad forces. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it did. I think we can, that's why I think people are here, is we can see an upwards trajectory, and we can see these business models starting to filter across different domains, but they've all got the similar or all the same sorts of ideas that are starting to have new business models being created, and that's very exciting. But as you also say, it then starts to challenge the powers that already exist, and what their role is in these new domains.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Thank you very much. Now, I've done my best as chair to skim down. I think Shiza, I think we're with you actually. A question of policy, which is interesting. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. So hi, I'm Shiza. I actually work at a think tank called Policy Connect, and I help provide secretariat for the all-party parliamentary group for design and innovation. And I'm also pursuing a master's part-time, so I'm really involved with the LSE Visual Arts Society, and we're actually trying to organize an NFT conference, so being here today is great. So coming from this kind of perspective, my question to you is, I know that you raised a point about, for example, there's no clear regulation on how you're using your artists that you work with and printing out their work, and how you might present that. From your perspective, what is the ideal future state, legislation and regulation wise, and what does that look like to best protect artists, because that's what we really want to make sure we do, right?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer, but I do know that artists didn't realize that they should maybe put that in their metadata. So what's starting to happen now is that artists are placing within the description of the work on the NFT saying this token comes with a right to print this off once, or to it comes with the right to a physical item that I will ship to you, and if you ever sell it in the future you need to ship it to the next owner. Sometimes a little bit optimistically thinking that people will follow those rules, but that's being written into the metadata of the NFT. So that's maybe one way, is education to the artists, that they can place this within their data so that then for always it will be visible. But if that is not the case, if the artist hasn't placed it within their metadata, I think that I don't know, I've thought about this a lot. I think that it could be that you tell the marketplaces that they need to facilitate those fields so that people do stipulate what it is, or that you create new standards and new terminologies for different NFTs that are for different uses. So currently we're calling everything an NFT. There's one new term that's come out, which is a POAP, which is a proof of attendance protocol. And that's an NFT that you get because you were at a location. So these types of things will start coming about, and probably there will be policy for each different type of NFT depending on what type it is. So I know that wasn't very concrete, but hopefully it's helpful.
No, it is helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiza. Now, Sasha, I managed to miss you. I'm so sorry. There have been so many messages down the right side of my screen. Please invite your question.
Brilliant. Thank you. No, that was really helpful. And actually building on a bit of what the previous speaker was talking about, I am in the arts world. I've been a gallery director for the past 5.5 years, but working particularly in primary market limited edition prints. So I'm now, as a consultant, advising my artists like Sir Peter Blake and Bruce McLean as to this new world. And of course, you know, they are very stuck in the original print world. And I'm wondering if there is room for an overlap. So for instance, people like artists like Jackie Tsai, we would be putting augmented reality into silk screens so the whole thing comes alive. And, you know, Rupert Truman, who worked with Storm Thorgerson on all the Dark Side of the Moon, Biffy Clyro, all of these album covers. In your opinion, because I feel I'm really I'm chatting, but I don't really feel like much of an advisor because I don't know the answers. But can we talk about perhaps in an NFT combining a bit of what you offer within an original print with a bit of an NFT, perhaps with a bit of a film footage that he's got with Syd Barrett? Is this allowed? What's allowed? You know?
Everything is allowed, but also there are lots of different marketplaces. So there are marketplaces coming about for multimedia works. So you can have many different media together. I think one of them is called One Of, so One OF. But I think that one of the things that I've been talking a lot about is differentiating between digitized art NFTs versus digital art NFTs. Currently, the pieces that make the most money and that are really valued by people who want to buy them are digital art NFTs because they could never be owned before. And there's this hunger to support artists that could never have done this before. It's not necessarily digitized art NFTs that are selling. However, there is potential for digitized art NFTs. It can be just used as a proof of ownership. So the NFTs sold by the Uffizi were actually proof of ownership that you were allowed to display in your home on a screen that is exactly the same size as the original work, a digital version of the artwork. So if you buy that NFT, you're allowed to have that Donatello Tondo screen. So it's like it's a proof that it's authorized to be shown digitally. And then in the case of the Hermitage, what they did was they took the Da Vinci and actually had the director sign it with his hand to differentiate it from the original, and that it was somehow a digitized version of that artwork. And that's why with the Whitworth, we decided to mint the multispectral image, because it was different from the original. It's its own project, and it's showcasing the research done within the institution, and it's an image that could never have been seen online before, which the Ancient of Days is in the open domain. Anyone can see it online. So I think it's about thinking, what is the value that people want to collect? Is there anything that they own or that they have produced that has never been able to be collected before because it is digital, and that then this technology can facilitate, rather than thinking this is a great artist and they have great work and so they should be selling NFTs? Because I think then you lose some of that value.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think it kind of describes to me the difference between, in original printing terms, a digital print versus an etching, a litho, a silk screen, a hand colored, a block, or whatever it might be. It should be original in itself. So perhaps NFTs are the new original artworks that
Absolutely.
are created.
And that's what's happening, right? So you have monoprints, which are the ERC 721s, the one of one NFTs. You can never have another. You have the limited edition, or you have the postcards, the pieces that the British Museum just sold, the Hokusai NFTs, in my opinion, are postcards, because it's just JPEGs with the metadata from the museum that have been minted in an edition of 10,000. And I think there's a little bit of a problematic thing there, because those are the cheapest ones and they're selling for $400. So then what is the value there, and why is it $400? It's probably because of speculation, and probably because of something that isn't for the culture. So I think or it could be that people are buying it because they want to support the British Museum, but there hasn't been a statement from the museum about that. So I think that you need to have a really clear view of what is this print. If you're going to do it in just a JPEG of a photograph of a physical work, it's a postcard. It's not really a work of its own.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Great. Hey, look, perfect timing. How is that possible? It's all about the timing, Bernadine told us. Look, really fantastic. I think I have to say, in terms of, let's think, an hour and a quarter, we went deep, we went historical, but we understood in depth through the questioning some of the characteristics of this. So thank you so much, Bernadine. I'm sure if you could hear the applause, there'd be a Mexican wave.
Also, thank you, because I've learned from all of you. So it's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. I'll hand over to John now, who's, I think, going to take us into part 2. Thanks again, Bernadine.